hit record. I think you already know my name. I'm Jimmie, and I come from Kenya, but right now I live in the US, and I'm in the University of Pennsylvania doing my master's right now. And prior to that, we met in Kenya, or we met virtually in Kenya, and we partnered on a very interesting project, the Story Moja Read Aloud, which I really want to give you kudos with your team and how that really continued the conversation of how important literacy is, and how important kids being able to read and being able to enjoy and have fun while doing that is important in sustaining some of the gains around reading. So I am in the US, trying to understand a little bit more about how to make communities resilient and how to really sustain the resiliency through things that are child-centered or child-facing. And primarily our work has been in this past few weeks and months has been to organize those child-facing, human-centered ways of living and storytelling. So thank you for making the time to be here. So to you, Cody.
Hello, Wangari. I don't know what time it is there, but it's bright early in the morning for me, so I'm gonna do my best. But you'll also notice that my lighting here, it's dark out. So as we go on, there will be like a window that lights up in front of me, and it'll look normal, as opposed to nighttime. But my name's Cody, as I said. I am a former teacher. I spent 8 years teaching reading in English language and elementary general ed teaching. And spent most of my time honestly doing language, but I always focused in reading, generally at the elementary level. So students from the first year all the way to the 6th year of school. I spent 2 years teaching in West Africa, English as a foreign language in the middle school range. And then I just finished up a master's at Penn, where I met Jimmie, focusing on literacy, among other things. I guess systems approaches to education was something that I really latched onto, and monitoring eval is what I've been looking at most recently. So I am still looking for employment, but Jimmie brought me on, I don't know how many months ago, a few months ago at this point. And we've just been working on moving things along from where they used to be, which I don't know nearly as much about where the program is coming from, but we've been talking about where it might be going. So it's nice to meet you, and I hope you're doing well. I don't know what time it is where you are, but
no, here it's actually in the evening. It's 4 p.m. on this side, so I've had a few more hours of awakeness compared to you guys. Yes, my name is Wangari, and I'm a lover of stories. Basically, I think that sums me up. Whether it's my main thing is actually performance. I am a performance storyteller. So that's the main thing I do, performing in schools. So for example, the last 2 weeks have been really crazy on this side because it has been World Book Day, Book Week for most of the schools around here. So children's events, festivals around the world. But basically my main thing is actually storytelling. I am also a children's author. I have quite a number of titles that have been published. And so that's Wangari. That's the first hat that I wear. The other hat that I wear, where now I linked up with Jimmie last time, is that for a long time, I've done things with Story Moja. One, they are my first publishers, my very first books, the ones who published them. And I, together with a colleague of mine called Anne, who I think Jimmie met last time, we have worked on a number of programs with Story Moja before. And one of the programs that we worked with, we used to work at Story Moja. We were employed at Story Moja years ago. Yeah. And it was actually the Read Aloud program. And the Read Aloud program is basically trying to get the largest number of school children in the country reading from the same text at the same time, but in different venues. And we began this project in 2012 when we were still in Story Moja. I think I left Story Moja in 2016 and had left in 2015. But then over the last 2 years, they called us back as consultants to run the project afresh. And it's a really interesting project because, I mean, one here, I don't know how it is in the US, but here, the way the curriculum is structured is really about passing exams. So you cram as much as you can, you pass your exams, and that's it. So cultivating a love for reading has not been very big here. So that's one of the things that I really loved about the project we were doing to Read Aloud. I'm also involved in curating events and festivals around education and the arts. So in 2017, we did the Story Moja Festival, which is basically bringing in book lovers and authors and artists over 5 days to just come around celebrating books with a very wide program, and where we had about 4,000 school children participating over 3 days and about 2,000 adults. And then the other hat that I wear is that I and a friend of mine called Anne, we are the co-founders of a very small not-for-profit called All4Books. And All4Books partners with different publishers and authors and book lovers to, where possible, donate specifically storybooks, readers, to schools and help them to set up programs that promote reading. Because I believe that, if you're literate, then I think that's the first thing, even if it's around academics. You can't do an exam in mathematics if you can understand simple comprehension. You can't read. So yes, that's basically me in a very wide nutshell.
I'm always enthralled by how people tell their story, and I like whenever someone says, these are the hats that I wear. It's an imagery that really sends me thinking about what do hats do, as a performative thing, what do hats do and all that. So yeah, thank you for sharing your story and telling us how your day has, how your weeks and days have been in the past. And I've been following your work on Twitter, and thank you for always tagging me. I think it warms my heart to see that kids are having fun, and it kind of opens the day for me in most cases, because you are ahead of me. So when I wake up, I get to see, oh, this has been done when I was still sleeping. So so it's quite heartwarming. So the primary reason for us to really meet today was to really think of the next step for Afribuk. The first step for us was to, I think, before we even met Story Moja and partnered with Story Moja, and was to drive the literacy levels of this community in the south of Kenya, Mashuru. And we tried our level best, built a school, put books in, and continuously supported the teachers as well in ways that are meaningful to them, in ways that are centered to their own being and well-being, and really supporting them to really nurture these particular kids. And we tried and 4 years after, we are still in that process. We are still in the learning journey, in which I think Cody brings in some of that particular experience of learning and adapting, and really reframing our work a little bit better. So part of the deliverables for this particular 5 years that we are looking forward looking is the practices, the ways of living through stories, the ways that are more practical, the ways that can be can be shared widely, and the ways that are impactful when stories are told. How can they be impactful, and how can they be shared widely? So that is one of our deliverables within the human-centered approach to Afribuk Society's work 2023 and ahead. So yeah, so like I shared, we are hoping that by documenting some of these particular practices, we might be able to create a repository of high leverage storytelling practices, really identifying specific people in the community who are able to, exceptional people, educators, parents, and storytellers like you, who I believe you're also a parent and an educator as well. So you wear so many hats. If you were to exhaustively share all the hats, we would still be here talking and listening to you. So really come up with this exceptional people and bring them on board, and amplify their work, and really pinpoint things that are, oh sorry, yep. So pinpoint some of the ways that are, these are the concepts, the practices, the things that we feel like could be shared along the way with parents and many other people, stakeholders within education. I think when you shared about education in Kenya focusing on passing exams, I mean, every single parent has made it to themselves and to their children that we really want you to pass exams, because it's important for us to, if you pass exams, you get better grades. So the parents have wield so much power to really enact change. And our idea is that we want to leverage and create more power for them by giving them ways that are positive, how they can really positively use their power or their ways of living, so that children can be able to learn beyond school and beyond and in their homes and all that. So that is our way. We create this repository where these practices can be leveraged and can be used by multiple stakeholders. So in addition to that, we hope by our own mission, we hope to extend the community's needs, or extend the community's desires and aspiration for a better life, because storytelling has an end, and in almost all the stories that I've always read, there's a beautiful ending, and that is my hope, that beautiful endings could be achieved in our work, or sustained life or well-being can be achieved, and our mission is to, within the model that we work, we bring wholeness from the pieces that are usually disjointed, the science of reading, the science of living, and being able to bring them together to this whole, which is very important, and would help us create a more unified community, and where children are reading to comprehend, reading to live, and also growing developmentally in ways that are uplifting. Okay. So yeah, so like I shared, these are the high leverage practices, storytelling practices are just, these are ways that storytelling could be used widely, and ways that are proven, and they could be concrete actions or activities, like leading a discussion in a classroom. I remember vividly when I was in school, I think I balanced between the two different kinds of schools in Kenya. I was in a private school when I was very young, in a kindergarten, which was Montessori like kindergarten, where my mother was teaching at that time, and my mother took us there because she was teaching K1, and so in a way she wanted us to learn in the best school where she gets paid through us getting education, and I remember our teachers used to kind of engage us in ways that were different from when I went to a public school, where teachers wanted to just complete the syllabus and you know.
Mm-hmm.
And it's one way that that some of these particular things are not taught in school, in the schools where they come from, like in the TTCs, in the universities. They're not being taught to lead discussion. They're being told to proctor. They're being told to, you know, to do this rote learning where you go in front and finish up whatever you're doing, and just deposit the knowledge to kids. So these practices are not new. The idea of practices are not new. And like you can see, this is from the source of teaching works in America. These particular practices are not new. There are ways that exist, and it's just a matter of reminding. I feel like the world needs more reminding rather than like a lot of rebuilding. I think it's just reminding and reminding because they exist outside there. We often don't see it because our minds are a little bit focused narrowly. So our idea is to develop a similar example or this particular practices, and creating videos and resources for teachers to view from any part of Kenya, and even later on leverage them to parts of Africa. And we believe that Africa is not monolithic, but some of the storytelling practices are shared across boundaries. And so we hope that we can start from Kenya and disperse from Kenya, and share the wonderful things that you and your colleagues have been doing in tidbits and ways that are scalable.
Can I jump in really quick, Jimmie?
Yeah, sure.
On that last slide,
Yeah.
I just wanted to emphasize that the picture that is on that slide is from Teaching Works, which is an American website that features high leverage teaching practices, and the things on that slide or on that picture are not necessarily related at all to what we're doing. It's more the thinking behind how those practices were arrived at that I think is important. So those are the granularity of those practices was chosen very specifically with a few things in mind. The first one is that when teaching educators often latch on to small, simple, concrete things that they can do with their students that will have a big impact. And so when you teach just a bunch of theory, it's really hard to get teachers to use it, right? And so when you give them smaller, more manageable, concrete actions, they tend to use them. And they tend to like getting those kinds of activities or practices or whatever they may be, because it's easy to implement. On the other side, the people at Teaching Works have worked really hard to not get such small practices that you lose meaning by just doing them in whatever which way, right? So leading a discussion, for instance, has a clear intention behind it, right? Because you are engaging people, you're bringing them together through discussion, you're maybe asking specific questions that will prompt them to have certain kinds of answers. So the point is that there is some amount of context and meaning to each practice. And we would be thinking of this from a storytelling perspective and trying to connect storytelling to that eventual linguistic and literacy learning. So we don't want to lose that overarching idea behind what the practice is, but we also want the practice to be something that is small enough that it can be easily used by a lot of people, where it's concrete, where it's easily describable, and we can show it. So I think that's sort of the balance between what a practice is supposed to be and how it's supposed to impact educators and storytellers.
Yeah, and I do agree with Cody in that our intention is to not go too granular and lose the rigor around it. We want to maintain the rigor and the depth that is needed for some of the skills to be imparted to children. So this is just one way of organizing it and learning how we can do our organization.
And let me say that there's a lot of argument over what those practices are. And that is something that we will go through. because
Yeah.
we do not have a list of storytelling practices. We are trying to develop them.
Yeah.
And everyone's going to have different ideas about what those are.
Yeah, and that is true. And each community and each particular stakeholder we might meet might have their own way of storytelling, which is meaningful to them. And how do we kind of find this walking balance for us to incorporate this particular divides together and bring one unified tool for teachers is going to be an important journey for us. And we are excited about it, despite the fact that we are also trading on very tough waters about reading and all that. It's usually a very huge debate around it. But yeah, thank you, Cody, for that. So so this is just one of the examples. We did not write using prompts just because you were going to meet us, because you're a performative storyteller. but it's quite timely because and I'm gonna reflect far, like not really far away from this, but I'm gonna use this to kind of remind kind of share a story a little bit of how props can be used, or even creative artifacts can be used to anchor a story rather than it being the story itself. My grandmother, I usually, not usually, but in the recent past, before I left Kenya a couple times, like moving from Qatar to Kenya and all that, I used to go and see my grandmother a lot, and she would in those moments use food as a prop, and that was, to me, I didn't really understand that it was a prop or a creative artifact for her to tell the story. And it was passed down to my mother as well, because each single ingredient that my grandmother used had stories about it. And there was this particular fish I come from a fish tribe, so there's this particular fish. It looks like a snake. I don't know the right name, but it's called kamongo in Kenya. And my grandmother used to cook it a lot whenever I'm around, because it has a lot of flesh and no bone, just cartilage and flesh. And it's specific of freshwater lakes and all that. So my grandmother used to make it, and whenever she would prepare it, she would usually tell a story. Like, she would tell the story of when she first had this fish, and she would tell a story of what really happened on that particular day, when each day, like whenever they were preparing that fish in her household when she was young. So this particular fish became the prop for her. She became the tool for her to anchor on this particular story, because it invites kids to be able to really stay grounded in this particular story, and to represent some of the characters that are needed to interact our stories and share this particular stories. And she would be like chopping the should explain that I was chopping the fish, and when I open it, I found eggs inside. So she would share, this fish gives birth 6 months, or six times a month. Like, they would have eggs 6 times a month, and all these particular stories were emanating from that particular fish. So it became an anchor for what she wanted to tell, but it was not the story. The prop is not the story, but it is a very important ingredient. Another one is imagined history. And Cody, do you want to explain this a little bit?
Yeah, I mean, this is really more of an activity. As I'm looking at it, I'm like, yeah, this is too small. But pretty much, it's using something in your community or something in your everyday life to make a story up. And so there are a number of different ways you can do this, and that's probably if this becomes a practice then it would be a little bit bigger that encompasses all of those different ways of using your environment as a context for telling stories and making things up and being creative. But this is where you choose just an object. So that rug that's hanging behind Jimmie would be a great object in this case. And we would tell our made up idea of what its history might be and why it's hanging on Jimmie's wall and how it arrived here today. And we would all three have totally different stories that we could tell about why that rug is hanging on Jimmie's wall. And so it's really a way that parents can connect with kids. Parents can teach about things around them, bring in words that kids don't know, and then share the activity with kids. It's fun. It's based in, familiar items and just being creative in thinking about them. And so there are a bunch of other activities that do a similar sort of they start from the same place. So like you can walk through a community and tell stories about people and the places that you see as you're walking through, or that would be another similar activity that would be maybe included in the same practice. But yeah, these are just examples to sort of, we don't really know where we're going. So that's something that we are looking to develop with people who are familiar with what might actually work in the community.
And I think like the whole imagined story is more like an explorative journey where you get to find something and expound and go crazy on that particular something and just really share a story around it. So these are just examples, like Cody mentioned. These are not entirely what these are what we know, but we believe that you and your colleagues know much more better and might actually improve our work.
So I think this is actually quite good. It also reminds me of some of the things that I do. I am not a trained teacher myself, but I have worked with children for many years. I think going to almost 20 years now. And it reminds me of some of the things that I do, because I sometimes do storytelling trainings for teachers on how to use stories to teach, even in class. And you find that stories can actually be used in a number of ways. So for example, teaching a second language. How do you use a story to do that? How do you use a story as an anchor to teach? For example, if you're teaching something around social studies, as opposed to coming and saying, let's say you're teaching about wild animals, domestic animals, as opposed to coming and saying, okay, so this is a cow, it looks like this, a goat looks like this. How about you actually you come and share a story, especially if you're working with younger children, do a story and then use the story as a basis for whatever it is that you actually want to teach. And also sometimes when you're actually I'm working with the pupils themselves, especially in the lower classes. And I tell them, all of us are storytellers. And they're like, no, but you tell stories, we listen to stories. Is that you can also even create stories in the round together. As I start, before you start writing stories, just pick 3 random things that will give you a setting, a character, and then you can actually tell a story together as a precursor to actually coming to writing. So yeah, I totally agree that these are some examples of how story can actually be used in different ways in the classroom.
I like when you say setting character. I don't know, could you go deeper into explaining what you mean by setting character? I think you have explained, but I feel like there's more juice in that I would like to kind of get out.
So of course, I mean, you are people who are probably trained teachers, unlike me. But of course, as a writer, sometimes I get called and I'm asked, okay, can you come and talk to our students something around writing? And of course, I'm assuming that the school has already talked to them about what is a story. And basically a story, you're answering the 5 W's and the H. But then most of the time is that it's very theoretical. So what I would maybe come to a session and ask the children is say, okay, all right, so we want to do a story together. Okay, so where do we want our story to happen? Okay, so, and we'll pick suggestions. So okay, no, it happens on a farm. No, it happens on the street. Oh, it happens in a house. Okay, so you say, okay, so all right, so our setting for the story will be in a house. So who is involved in the story? and we'll probably maybe have like two characters and say, okay, so the story has an old man who is blind, and someone will say, okay, I want the story to have a cat. All right. So in a way, we already have our characters and where the story is set. And I asked the children that we sit in the round, and all of us will just add one sentence to the story. So the idea is to make sure that every sentence that you actually add actually adds to the story. So I will start and say, okay, so once upon a time, there was an old house that stood at the edge of the forest. And someone said, okay, and in the house, there lived an old man who blah, blah, blah. So basically, it's just trying to add on to the story such that every child feels like, oh, okay, I don't have the burden of creating the story myself. And it's actually, so we can actually do a story that they also feel that they can create original stories, so to say, but in a setting that they are actually choosing. And then once you finish the story, then you can actually now go through what is taught theoretical and say, okay, so what did the story happen? And basically that's our setting. So how can we make our setting a bit better? Okay, so where was the house? It was in the forest, or was it on the corner of the street, or was it right in town? And so just trying to break down a story, whether it is told or it is written to them, so that it doesn't look like, this whole very difficult thing that they're actually trying to learn. And also in this particular way, also encouraging them in terms of explaining themselves and public speaking, because then you actually have to speak out about something. And also you also have to really listen to what the persons before you have said about the story. So you don't actually either take the story back or say something that does not relate to the story. And then in different settings, and I think something I've done now with all the children is also around, okay, so how do I use sentence structure to create the mood of a story? Okay, so if I use primarily long sentences, what kind of mood am I trying to create? If I use very short ones, I'm creating tension and I'm showing things are actually happening. So yeah, so just things around that for me, as a practitioner, as someone who works with stories both in oral and in written, as opposed to someone who is a trained teacher who is actually teaching, in a class.
Thank you. Cody, do you have a reflection about it?
I want to say that I used the word educator. Since I made this presentation yesterday, I was very careful to use the word educator because, we are looking at interacting with parents and teachers and possibly together. And, all parents are educators. All storytellers are educators. And I did not want to, go down the road where we are constantly talking about teachers, which eliminates a whole group of people who do all kinds of work that is super meaningful. And frankly, teachers are only with kids for what percentage of their lives, and it's all the other educators in their lives that have so much greater impact, which is one reason why we are thinking about working with parents and storytellers, because they have such greater reach and such greater impact in a lot of ways. So I'm glad you were bringing that I don't know who we are up, because we're all educators, and I don't want it to become a teacher thing, because it's educating children is for everyone. So that was my first thing I was thinking about. Jimmie, I don't know if you had another thought in your mind.
No, I'm just I think I'm reflecting quite deeply on the point where Wangari, where you mentioned that you, through this particular story ideation process, or being able to weave ideas from kids together, it helps break down the complexity of coming up with a full story. It breaks it down from not only the book level to the paragraph level, but also to the sentence level, and to even most probably the syllables and all that. And that's like really, really good. So I'm just in that moment of appreciating how complexity can be cut down to very tiny bits of delivery points, and so that's very beautiful. Cody, do you have anything to share?
No, I actually agree. The storytelling technique that you mentioned, I have come across, I've never used it as a teacher myself, but I've totally come across that where students share like one sentence of a story. In fact, maybe I have used that. I have, but not in the same way. It was written. So everyone writes one sentence and then you pass the paper, and then the next person writes the next sentence and then you pass the paper. So that's like the written form of it, right? And then at the end you get to read each story and what the crazy things happen, right? But yeah, no, also word choice is and sentence length is another thing that is one of the topics that I was thinking about. And what you just said about sentence length is actually a great way of thinking about it in a lot bigger and more wholesome way. So I love that input. Let me think. Jimmie, I don't think we've really talked about the videos. I don't know if you want to move into that.
Just move into it. Just
okay.
start it off, and I'll pick it up from you.
So pretty much like what we're talking about with these practices are going to become the curriculum that we use to interact with communities. And one part of that curriculum is actually figuring out what the practices will be, and developing them and being able to describe them. But another big part of giving easy access to what those practices are is actually working with storytellers and educators from Kenya and filming them as they tell a story, and then pointing out the elements or practices that they are using while they tell those stories, so that we have video of those storytellers. And then Jimmie and I have also talked about interviewing whoever that exemplary storyteller is and asking them about, like, what do you think about storytelling? What makes a good story? I don't know, Jimmie, you probably have some NPR questions in your mind for that. But yeah, so these would be videos that we aim to, first off, build a repository of stories that we have that we can share with people because they're awesome stories, but also point out how these practices are being used and show them to communities so that they can use them as a model. And then I guess the next slide, Jimmie, is the community of practice, or the community events that we are looking at trying to engage communities with this curriculum, in which we, try to build some sense of community, have discussions, very sort of large discussions, what I call reframing discussions about what education is and why we all care about it, and whether or not we're aiming for good academic scores or for real people that have make real decisions in real places. So the number 3 is learning from experts. That would be using those exemplary storytellers, showing videos, showing audio to communities as a way of inspiring them, but also illustrating and modeling really great practices that they can use in everyday lives with their children. Modeling those approaches would be sort of the same, but showing them what those actual practices are and giving tips around what they are. Something we haven't talked about is actually the number 5, modeling reading, reading instruction, which is something that we're looking at collaborating with a group of people who do a lot more with the actual phonics and decoding and literacy components. So, a 10-minute section on how to teach letter sound relationships to kids. And then some amount of, we haven't Jimmie, I don't think we have decided if we're going to do number 6 or not, but potentially some sort of delivery of materials, even books in local languages. I don't know what that'll be.
Yeah,
it's a big goal, a nice far off dream. We don't know how much of this we'll be able to do, but that is sort of the idea, and I'm sure I'm missing something. Jimmie, do you want to add?
No, I can talk about number 6 because primarily that's where we started. We started with delivery of books 4 years ago, And our model was unsustainable. We were getting books from here to Kenya, and it was not sustainable. And I think when I got to meet Story Moja, I realized that there's a structure there that we could utilize, because they work on creating stories. And primarily, you being an author and being someone who is creating stories for the use of children, our hope is that we can create stories in those languages that are specific to these kids. And so Story Moja provides this particular bridge between the divide of the struggles that we had in delivery, cutting the logistical troubles that we had, to really being able to have kids and teachers. And when we say delivery of text and materials, we don't just limit ourselves to students. We also think of teachers as really needing the materials as well, like the reading instruction materials. And of course, we haven't really gone into granular with it. We haven't figured out the particular elements that would contribute to us delivering fully the materials and everything. But we do envision that as one of the other ways of because communities in the South, or communities in low middle income communities, the only thing that I think they not only struggle with the shortage of teachers, they also struggle with shortage of text. So being able to supply that and also anchoring or really putting together this particular story, human-centered curriculum, would be able to support the communities to sustain themselves. So I think we're done with the slides, right? Yes, we're done with the slides, but we're not done yet, because I feel like there's still more to talk about. I saw the last presentation that you did, Wangari, where I don't know which place it was. I think it might be in the German Institute in Kenya. Is it Gothe? I don't know how to pronounce it very well. But could you share more about the whole experience of that? Like what goes into coming up with that particular experience?
So which particular, because what we did at the Gote last time, we did two things. So one, I am actually working on a project with a German musician. It's been a collaboration we've done since 2020. And basically what we were doing is that we picked a topic that we felt was important to be discussed. And we created a performance out of it. So did stories, did research at first, wrote stories, and then he wrote music, and then I did the rehearsal. So it's actually a music and storytelling performance. But what we did at the Gote this last time is that it's quite unique, because one, the project is it's really, I'm not really sure if it's curriculum or co-curriculum, because it's a very heavy topic. We were dealing about colonialism, and so we realized, when he reached out to me and said, hey, I'm thinking of applying for a fund to do a collaboration project, and I was looking for a storyteller, and someone recommended you. And when we were discussing about it, that we realized that for a start, that the way colonialism is taught in Kenya is very British centered, I think, in a way. And also the way they learn about colonialism in Germany is also, well, they don't really learn much around it, like, for example, how much they learn about the Holocaust. Because, so for example, Germany says that after World War I, they lost most of their colonies, so they don't discuss that. And we were looking at specifically, how does colonialism, even though that most African countries say, we got independence decades ago, how does that affect the lives of people now? And how do we tell those stories creatively in a way that it's not a lecture, it's not about history, but it's about just telling people, okay, this is the story as we are telling it, in the way that it's about people who actually live through this, as opposed to how, for example, the curriculum here in Kenya teaches is about, okay, so that we are actually still learning about the benefits of colonialism, for example. So that's actually it was a very controversial, but I think interesting project that we were doing. And for that, it's actually, for me, I look at it as a conversation that we actually say, okay, so we're looking at people. So when you talk about something, what does it mean? What are the stories behind the statements and the facts? So when you come to somewhere and say, okay, so this community, their livelihood is around cows, what exactly does that mean? Apart from just one line, how exactly have cows impacted these 2 or 3 lives in the particular community? If you're talking about, and that's actually what we're looking at. So for example, when we looked at different perspectives, so for example, in the terms of like Kenya, because we were looking at 5 countries. So we're looking at Kenya, Tanzania, Namibia, South Africa, and Congo. And we were looking at, we went away from political figures, because, for example, if you're discussing Kenya, then of course you're discussing Jomo Kenyatta. If you're talking about South Africa, you're discussing about Nelson Mandela. But we went off and just looked at people who are just leading their everyday lives, or just giving a different perspective. So for example, in Kenya, we were looking at the love story between Dedan Kimathi and his wife, Mukami. And basically looking at the struggle for independence through their eyes. And it's just like looking at, it was interesting to see that, for example, even the execution of Dedan Kimathi was actually discussed in the British Parliament. And some people were saying, it does not make sense that you actually, you want to hang this guy for basically what he's doing, and just looking at, South Africa, we're looking at Miriam Makeba, and, just how much of our story is tied to apartheid regime in South Africa. So that was actually a very unique kind of project that we are doing. And so we have done it in a number of venues here in Kenya, mostly to high schools, because we are thinking they're the guys who will be voting in a few times. And if you're still talking about the benefits of colonialism, really, it's something we really need to rethink. And we thought we can change the curriculum because that's beyond us, but we can try and change the thinking of people around these kinds of issues. And we've also done the show severally in different places in Germany. We've done it in Munich and Berlin and Bayreuth. And yes, so the tour still continues. We are doing shows in secondary schools here. And we're also going to do a tour in Germany once again later this year. But that's actually like a very unique project that uses storytelling and music for a particular outcome.
Oh, thank you.
Yeah.
I'm really engrossed by the invaluable role that stories play in this conversation around colonialism and neo-colonialism as well, because in ways we don't get to communicate enough through the texts that have been shared in our schools. They do not communicate these particular stories enough. I feel like the lenses at which kids are being educated are the lenses of being dominated. Like, oh, this is, our people are dominated by this, and that's enough, and that's where we're gonna rest, and we hope that you will not ask more questions about it. And I feel like the conversation with your work and the conversation that your work makes with history and brings it down to the child is one that is quite progressive, and it kind of touches on into what we really hope that our work could be. Our work could really exist in the life, in the present, the life of people, because storytelling is within our own lives. We live stories, we continue with stories, and we imagine stories. We even think of the future through stories. So I think you kind of emphasized on a thing that we really hope that would be one thing that should come out of this conversation with us is the idea of the wholeness of the child and the idea of actually existing in this life and for the betterment of the community, you know, because our biggest hope is that when we continue to meet people like you or educators, we are able to question them or even push them to this inquiry process and ask them, what do you hope that your work could contribute to these communities, and what is the particular place that you situate yourself? Cody, do you have anything while I stop rambling?
Well, I love the connection between the imagined histories example that I talked about earlier and what you just said, which was very much different, but you know, telling histories from different perspectives, through different people, through different objects. And I'm thinking about how, you know, that could really develop that single activity that I just happened to choose for this conversation. But the connection is clearly there. Also, you know, one of the overarching themes and principles that when it comes to storytelling is finding ways to connect it to, specifically storytelling from an educator's perspective, right? Is connecting the story to the child's life, their community, things that feel meaningful to them. And I think like the question of what stories do you want to tell that are important to you is something that should serve as an overarching idea that we should be communicating to parents, because often there is an idea that telling other people's stories will help their children as a parent learn things that they wouldn't have otherwise learned. And yet we know that teaching children about themselves is one of the most valuable things that they can get. And so that's something that we need to remind parents over and over and over. Is, you know, as a teacher of students in English as a foreign language or English as a second language, we always tell the parents, speak your first language, speak your first language, speak your first language, because it's so important to overall language development. It's whenever we get a language, we should get the language in its full like richness, right? And parents are best equipped at giving that in their first language, right? So that's something that we always say, and it has huge impacts on learning. And I think what you were talking about really touches on that. But more from the story side, like what stories are relevant, what stories make us feel whole.
Yeah. So, so one last question that I have, and this is just going off that particular trajectory of the outcomes of what the work that we do. I mean, I'm asking this from a place of curiosity. What do you hope that your particular work will continue to do? That is one thing that I really wanted to know more. What do you hope that your work would continue to do?
I think for me, the very first thing, and which is actually why I do most of my work with or around children or people who are dealing with children, is to actually, first of all, make learning fun. Because I think that's one thing we've removed from learning completely. Like, you know, learning is about getting in concepts and this and this. Is that, you know what, it's actually fun to just learn new stuff. Whether it's a new language or a new concept or, you know, just something different. That is actually fun. It doesn't have to be a very big task. You know, you can and you should actually enjoy learning. But the other thing is also to spark curiosity, especially in children and young people, because nobody knows everything. But if I can make you curious about one thing, then that might just take you down a whole rabbit hole of things that you actually find interesting. So just spark curiosity in the children. And another thing is to spark imagination. Because I think nowadays, when we are bombarded with a lot of facts and a lot of, we don't even give children time to develop a fantasy in their world or imagination, especially with things like television and being on the screen all the time and tablets and the internet. Because I think imagination really helps the child when they have to learn things that they're not familiar with or from their environment. And so I think for me, it's basically those things that one, that learning is actually fun, to just be curious about everything. When you're walking down the street, just look around, look at different people and wonder what could their stories be, because then if you're curious, then you might even be more, it's even more possible for you to actually ask, okay, so I don't understand this. What is this all about? Just be curious, look at the world in a very wide perspective, just look at it in one particular way. And also develop an imagination, because imagination takes you everywhere, as opposed to just, think, okay, this is a facts. Just try and look at, as much as we're learning the facts and the statements, what could be behind those facts, or, the statement that you're actually learning. To just have an imagination. And I really hope for me that is, anytime I go to do a performance or I write a book, I hope that the child who is behind that book or who is sitting there watching my show, interacting with my event, that takes those three things home, that, what, this is actually good for me, not just for my academic outcomes, but for me as a lifelong habit.
Yeah, thank you. So this actually is kind of takes us to the end of our conversation, but in transitioning to the question, now what, now what, and now why do we want to do this with you, and how do we get to do this with you, so like Cody mentioned, we hope to build this repository of videos and ways of storytelling by collecting videos of people storytelling and just doing it with children, and just studying them and really picking out the bits and pieces that we really feel like are scalable and also important and rigorous as well. So we primarily, my invitation here is that you could join us in this journey. You could be a part of this model of creation and be able to support us by really sharing one of your story sessions with us, and so that we can be able to use it for study and for creating this particular practices. And I don't know, Cody, if I missed anything.
I think that's that's everything. I guess the other thing would be maybe a short interview to just ask questions about your. I mean, we already just did that, but in the context of this video, ask a few short questions about what you believe about storytelling, and yeah.
So Cody, once again, do we have a timeline of when we need these videos?
We've been talking about trying to get a first few out as examples. So I don't know if we have necessarily a timeline on that, but that we are trying to get a prototype, right?
Right. Yeah. So Wangari, like Cody said, we hope to have this particular videos for our own, to invite more people and to also amplify our work and solidify it through studies that we want to conduct and really understand. And this will be an open source document, and being able to share it with Kenyans so that they can be able to involve many stakeholders in this literacy journey. So my invitation, and I think the the hooks have been set already. It's just a matter of latching onto them. Is that you could be our first co-creator, working with us in having this particular first video that we really want to launch into the world with, and really, because I believe that you have a lot of story events lined up, and you can be able to share some of your experiences with us, so that we can use them. And
so yes, maybe let me ask, do you have a particular kind of story in mind, or type of story or story told where? Because yes, maybe that's the first question that I would ask.
Yeah, that's a good question. That's a very good question. Cody, do you want to reflect on that while I keep pulling together some nods?
I would say no. I don't have a particular one in mind myself, but I would say that I think a story with an authentic audience is really important. And so any context in which you would be telling a story to an audience that's actually there, you're trying to engage them, as opposed to telling a story to a camera, right? And then because we are thinking so specifically about children, if it is with children or small young adults, I think that would probably be optimal, but I don't think that's a necessary element. I don't know. What do you think, Jimmie?
I do agree entirely with you, Cody. Our hope is that we don't just have a camera blasted on your face and we can't notice the interaction with the, because I feel like storytelling, and I think we've already discussed this, how much storytelling is it's an interaction, it's a conversation between an audience and the speaker and the storyteller. So the video is not going to be, we're not going to put a story and tell you this is the story we want to focus on, but we hope that you, alongside the video, we could have like a tiny bit of a synopsis of what this particular story that you shared was all about. But this is an additional deliverable that we do not need entirely, but it's out of your our own curiosity that you would really help us understand. Like, of course, when you tell the story, we'll understand it. So yeah, so no specific story, and camera, like we really need a video, like of you interacting with the children in the whole setting, and we would invite you for another follow-up interview when we have looked at the video and be like, we're curious about some 3 to 5 things, and we'll reel in on those 5 things, and we'll go deeper into fleshing them out and really saying that now we feel like we are very confident about these 5 things that we saw evident in your video. So yeah, so those are the to answer your question, that's what we have.
All right. So my follow-up question then would be, in terms like, do you want to record the video, or do you expect me to do the recording on my side? Because that also brings, most of the time when I'm doing events, even if I'm working with, especially if I'm working with children, I do not record the children.
Oh.
And mostly because, one, you're working with schools, and it actually means that if I am to do a video that is going to be shown online or even on my YouTube channel, and there is a child's face which is actually seen, that you actually have to get consent from each and every parent of the child who is in the video there. So I don't really do videos that have children in them or are showing children in them for that particular reason.
Yeah.
So if you're going to record, it has to be like to a very specific audience that that if it's a school or if it's a family setting, that they actually have no issues being seen on camera doing this.
Okay.
That's one thing. Yes, and in terms of like different stories, maybe I can share a few links of things that I've recorded in the past, some with a live audience, but I don't think I have one with children, but others also with just, I think I have one with an adult audience where they have seen a bit briefly, and others, especially during COVID, I actually realized I'm a lousy documentation. So most of the videos that I actually have done were during COVID, because then even if you're doing a live shoot, so to say, it's online, then you actually now get a chance to record it. But if you're recording an event that actually has children, that is usually the biggest challenge, that you have to get consent for each and every child who is visible there to be able to have the video out in public. And it's usually not very easy, because sometimes parents feel like, oh, okay, so why are you having my child in your video? Do you want to make money out of them? Do you want this? But if you have, let's say, for example, I don't know, the school that you actually support, and they would be willing to be the audience in this particular kind of video, then that makes things a bit easier. Yeah.
Yeah.
I don't think
Yeah, Cody, you want to say something?
Yes, I don't think the child would be in the video, but
Okay.
I think it would be apparent in filming you that you are in front of an authentic audience.
Yeah.
Okay. All right. Okay.
That impacts you as well as the storytelling. So I think that's more the intent behind having an audience.
Yeah.
All right. Okay. That makes sense. All right.
We and that's what I was gonna say. We don't want you to tell the story to yourself or to us. Our hope is that you share the story to the children, because how children behave or interact with you will influence how you
For the story is told.
Yeah, how you have an inflection, how you look at them. Like, there's a couple things that happen when you're telling something to a real and authentic, and all that. So we don't, I mean, you can give us an answer right now by telling us that you'd want to work with us on this. But we'll follow up. I think Cody and I will follow up with some sort of a documentation or partnership documents that we can formalize this, and just highlighting the deliverables that we expect and how we intend to use these particular videos. And we are a non-profit. We are not hoping to make any profit out of this. And it's just to extend the work of so many of you, to amplify your work. And we're gonna have to document your face, the name of your practice, so that we can be able to give you, push you into amplify your work to more clients and all. So I think Cody and I will follow up on a separate email with the partnership agreement and all that. And I don't know if you have any question regarding that or even more.
No, I think it's amazing work you guys are doing, and for me, anything that actually improves educational outcomes and learning outcomes to children, especially in areas that are not as well endowed as most areas. I think for me, that's something that I always support. So yeah, I think it's whatever you're doing is quite interesting, and yeah, I would be interested to be part of it. But yes, let me also see what you guys send, and then we can have a discussion over that.
Okay, appreciate it. Thank you. So yeah, so that's marks the end of a time together, and I'm very grateful, because I know you're a parent, and this is a weekend where you just want to wind down and just relax. And
yeah, and it's midterm weekend, so very important.
Like we don't want to rob you of your children, like family time, and sit with you, but we appreciate it. And I'm really eternally grateful, because when I got to work with you previously, and Cody, we worked on this event called Story Moja, Read Aloud, that they focused on one particular story that was looking into the social evils around tribalism and ethnic divides. And I remember I wrote the article about some of the particular things that some of these activities bring out the critical thinking that kids really need to be able to live harmoniously with others. and so I believe that there's a lot that we can do together, and to actually continue the work of you and your colleagues as well, and all that. So we're grateful. Cody, any remarks?
No, it's been wonderful speaking. I think listening to you has already given me a lot of ideas in my mind, and I look forward to working more together and trying to develop, a curriculum that works and is relevant.
Yeah.
So, thank you.
Thank you.
All right, so you guys, thank you so much. It was really nice talking to you, and yeah, you're doing a great job. Please keep at it, and I hope you guys have a lovely weekend. Okay, our weekend is almost over, it's just beginning, so have a lovely weekend.
Yeah, thank you. Yeah, it's just the
All right.
time zone thing, but yeah,
Yeah.
stay safe with the new developments in Kenya I keep witnessing. I hope that you all stay safe, and my family back there also stays safe and all that. So thank you for your time, and we will have this time again very soon. And have yourself a good evening.
All right. Okay. Bye, everyone. Bye.
Would you stay on the line?
Bye-bye.